And we are live on Discovery Paranormal, where you're going to find out all about tonight. You know what? We're going to talk about the a big chunk of the origin of man, and not recent history either. We're going to go back about 12, 13,000 years. So for quite a while now, I've been doing this research on the ant people and the culture out there in Utah, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, that area, the Four Corners in that area, and there's a lot of mysticism about it. There's a lot of talk about it. This is where they see skinwalkers and all that too, and a lot of sightings of lights in the skies and all that stuff. So, of course, you got Area 51 out there, and not too far from there, and other things like that. So there's a lot to it, I think. And when I read the original story about the ant people, I had reached out to this is a Hopi story. I had reached out actually to this Navajo chief named Wally Brown. And, he's going to be able to come on the air with me. I'd like to actually see him face to face and have this interview because this guy knows the stories of the ancients, and even the definition of what things are, what they refer to as, like Anastasi, for instance. Anastasi, people talk about the Anastasi Indians, and I've heard people who profess they were experts in Navajo language and whatever, white people, they're experts in all this, and then they knew, what these interpretation they called the Anastasi the evil ones and all this other stuff. So the real interpretation of Anastasi were the others, the ones who aren't like us, one's from somewhere else. It's that simple. So when you start like getting into the stories, love them, love the ancient stories. Like Wally tells stories about the net. By the way, I mean, you can go on YouTube and find this guy. He got these videos. They put them out, which is has a lot to do with Navajo culture, of course. And I think it's important to understand these things because this is kind of the cradle of mankind, as it were. Of a continuation. It's not the first time people are on the planet, but there was a space in between, and there's also the Ice Age. These guys, the Paleo Indians and also the Fremont, came about around 13,000 years ago. They really don't know. They try to put a time frame on it, but they don't really have one. Only that it was around 12, 13,000 years ago. These were the ones who made these awesome petroglyphs in the rock. Some they painted. The petroglyphs they just carved out. That's why the petroglyphs, they have different names if they paint them and however they come about. But the pictures depict what they called the ant people, what the Hopi called them the ant people, the Navajo called them the star people. In the ancient world, and this is before 13,000 years ago, there was gonna be some trouble, man. There was something that was going to happen, and all these people were called one way or the other, and they were gathered to this one location where they said they went underground with the ant people, is what the Hopi said. But they had met up with these beings, and they saved them from whatever catastrophe there was. They called that entering into another world, right? So some had a vision like the Navajo. During the day, they said they followed a cloud, so a weird cloud in the sky. At night, it was a light that they were following, and it brought them to this location. The Hopi says it was a song in their head, and they followed the song. And all these different cultures from that whole area, north, south, east, west, all went a different direction, but they all converged on the same location, which is just a little north of Moab, Utah. And if you go to Google Maps, Google Earth, and look at Moab, Utah, just north of there, that's where you find a load of petroglyphs. It was interesting because when I had traced the area first from the stories, and then when I started researching and looking through Google Maps of the area, like what does the area look like? What's there? Why would it be there and whatever? I had no idea at that time about those sets of petroglyphs that were made by different cultures that had come together at one point. And you're gonna love this. These cultures were told to build a place, to create a place where all of them could gather together and talk and trade and do what they got to do. They eventually all made their way down to Chaco Canyon, and Chaco Canyon is definitely known to a lot of people, especially in the paranormal world. But Chaco Canyon was where they gathered, and the Anastasi were also there. So it's interesting that Dan people translates into Anunnaki, and you'll probably know if you know this what I'm talking about. You know the Anunnaki, right? So the Anunnaki. Let's get into the Masaw, okay? Because this is really cool stuff, and this is like real life stuff. Not somebody's idea of what it could be or whatever. I like real stuff or real stories anyway. These guys are very proud of their stories. These cultures, it's not something that is easily changed. Among the clans and among the years. So anyway, this is the Hopi Indian, the Masao. There's all kinds of names, but it basically all sounds like Masao, Masao, but pronounced Masawa. That's really the pronunciation. They also call him Lord of the Dead, and is a cultural hero, a trickster at that. So a skeleton man is Lord of the Dead in Hopi mythology, but is often depicted as a benign and even humorous figure. In the Hopi creation, epic skeleton man is a culture hero who taught the Hopis the art of agriculture, as well as warning them about the dangers of the world. In other legends, he plays the role of a very earthy trickster who chases women and makes bumbling mistakes. These funny and scandalous stories make Skeleton Man into a more endearing, accessible figure. Through his aspects, those aspects can be terrifying. Skeleton Man is generally considered a great friend of humanity, right? So that gives you an idea of that. That's kind of like who they looked up to, and all the cultures have a different type of one, a different type. So, which I also find interesting, though the Anunnaki came and went, you know, and they were thought to be connected uh, to the Anastasi. So all right, so for this is long before Columbus. This is long before Jesus Christ, in a lot of these situations. And when you're going back 12, 13,000 years, I mean, you're going back well beyond what people were using chicken bones as tools. And they started finding various Indian cultures that started using like stones, for arrowheads and that type of thing, right? And keep in mind, there's not a lot that could uh, survive in that amount of time. Maybe some pottery, maybe some this, that, and the other thing. But they think that their technology was much, much greater than what people had given them credit for. So, so let's go back. Let's see. The Anasazi Indians were lords of what now is the American Southwest. The civilization was complex and sophisticated, of that as the Mayans. Then, apparently, without warning, the Anasazi all but disappeared. Right? Where do you think they went? Commentator Craig Childs is author of House of Rain, a new book that tries to solve the ancient mystery. A visit to the Anasazi site in southwest Utah offers clues. You see, and this is my problem with that. I'm going to critique this, man. Today, you're not going to find anything. You're going to find the ruins of the past, unless you find a magic door, or some kind of amazing information. This is a chunk of history. This is something that's significant that had happened. This is one culture helping other cultures survive, right? So the Anasazi connected to the Anunnaki came and went. You know, the Anunnaki was very big around the world and all cultures, and all of these cultures tell the same basic story on how they were taught to. Some said they were fallen angels, right? If you're going to get into the Bible aspect of it, of angels and whatever, this is before people even thought about angels, right? Talking about long before the Egyptians. This is before, right? So, all right, but this is where the Anastasi lived, and all these cultures developed over the years. But then all of a sudden, that these guys pop up. Their ruins are everywhere out here. The remains of a great Neolithic civilization, single buildings the size of the base of the Sears Tower, huge round ceremonial chambers with 90-ton ceilings. This was a landscape of monuments. You have to often wonder how they could really put these things together. Pretty amazing. But this guy said coming down to the canyon, he reached an ancient stairway. He could see where it was chiseled out by hand, the hammer strokes and stone tools. It's the largest stairway out here he knows of. It's been carved right into the bedrock, and you can walk down these first one, two, three, four, five steps, and the steps start getting deeper. Blah 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 blah. Let me get past all that. So let's see. An archaeologist recently discovered that the stairway is part of a prehistoric road, a 30-foot wide corridor for the Anasazi cut across the desert. 400 miles of these roads have been documented. 400 miles. They're building roads, right? And they were probably used by Anasazi caravans. Traders and migrants would have followed them carrying exotic birds and carved seashells, elaborately painted pottery, colorful loom. Yeah, they all met in Chaco Canyon. That was the place where they all kind of got off to, right? So, all right, the Anasazi lived here for more than 1,000 years. Then within a single generation, they were gone between 1275 and 13 AD. So they lived and they flourished, and not just the Anastasi, but I'm talking about the other Native American nations since 12 to 13,000 BC. Since that time, you're talking about thousands of years of civilization out there, and how they traveled around and made their way for a long time. And even still, there are scientists out there, and people alike that will tell you that the Native Americans migrated down from Russia, that they crossed the ice shelf and they came down and then they kind of split apart. The Navajo tale is that they came from the east over great rivers, and then uh, it's a whole different mentality. But the ones who are telling these stories about the ice shelf or whatever aren't the Native Americans. You know, they don't ask them, I guess. I don't know. But I like these stories because they make more sense. On Wally Brown talking about the Diné, which were the ancients, and the ancients had the ancient language where they were able to build mountains and do all this business. When Eve talks about how they were making the earth, terraforming the earth, and doing things that the earth needed so it could be survivable, and they had another being that he called the coyote. There, this impatient coyote who was basically in charge of all these other Diné. And he thought they were going way too slow. And the coyote, they were trying to place everything, the mountains and whatever. Then they had a basket of stars. And, the coyote said, come on, put these out there. You're taking too long. And then he basically took the basket and then flung it all around, and that was Orion's belt. They pointed to, that's why Orion's belt is there, and so many stars are all clustered together, and all this other stuff. It's because the coyote did this. These are stories that go way back. And for anybody out there, if you think of ancient aliens in any way, if you deny these stories or if you don't know them at all, you should learn them, because it's better than any others that are out there. It's untainted, and I think that it's actually pretty plain and clear on these civilizations and how in touch with with the Anunnaki that they were, right? Let's see. So let's just say, let's see. I have ample water in my pack, but I feel compelled to crouch beside one of these seeps and drink. It tastes clean, filtered through 10 million tons of sandstone. Water is what made everything possible here. When rainfall and reliable. Yeah, water is life. Wa- Water tables were up. The Anastasi built their roads and monuments. Then, when the population reached its highest level, a severe drought hit. Malnutrition coursed through the villages. Warfare broke out. Settlements that once stood proudly atop mesas fell onto the ruins. So, of course, you have calamity, because you need to live through the nature, right? Your water runs out, your food runs out. You see how fast society turns. So, okay, this is just basically all the stories on how these guys survived, right? But I want to talk more about why why they all met there at by Moab, and why they were all dropped off in the same location. They said they went underground. If you can read into that and say, well, they went into something and whatever. you know, I don't think that if it was some kind of ship, they were given a window seat. But they said that they were taken underground. This is where the ant people showed them how to build walls, do agriculture, so they can grow their own food and survive in the world that they were emerging into. Right. So what I wanted to know, like, what that area was like, because you're talking about a very long time ago, and I mean even well before that, it was all seawater. I mean Salt Lake didn't form around 10,000 years ago or about there. So in Salt Lake City, when you think of the time, it's an extraordinary amount of time. So so at that time, North America was occupied by the Paleo Indians, of course, and also the Fremont, the people. And that's basically the ones who lived at the beginning of the last ice age as it ended. So nomadic people, Paleo Indians, hunted mammoths, giant sloths. I was watching a special about Brazil, and how they said there was giant sloths down there that were 12, 14 feet tall, and they actually found these tunnel systems that were basically made by these sloths, and where they made their own caves. They clawed them out with their you know claws. So they had camelops, giant bison, and other animals that are now all extinct. And you think about these animals went extinct in a very short amount of time, 12,000 years. We're not talking about a million years here. We're talking about 12,000 years. These scientists think that it was these Indians that ate them all, like all of them. It's like, you know what? There weren't that many people. It wasn't like they were cities of millions of people or something. These were handfuls of people, few and far between. These tribes, they probably didn't number more than 30. You know, even I don't even think more than that. It was still very hard to live. You had to live off the conditions, right? So these guys also fished, hunted birds, and gathered seeds. You think there'd be a bunch of big fatzos after eating their way through the Great Plains. At that time, also there was, it wasn't so dry and arid and messed up. The ice is melting, backing off. There's that going on. So they said the climate 10,000 years ago was much different. The Utah temperature was cooler, and it might have rained more often. Paleo Indians camped along the shores of lakes and streams, like most others. You stay close to the water, including the Great Salt Lake, which was much larger and not yet salty. So the oldest inhabited sites archaeologists have found in Utah are in the caves in the Great Salt Lake Desert. Right? So approximately 8,000 years ago, the climate turned drier and warmer, and lifestyles had to change. Archaeologists call the culture of this time the archaic. Archaic people were hunters and gatherers, usually moving around as they followed food sources. Their shelters. I mean, isn't that how it is? You move for your job. you know, it's still that way. For the elements for the job, right? So their shelters were usually caves or wickiups made from brush. How do you make those, man? I'm looking for a place now. I can make a wickiup. You know, hey baby, hey baby, want to come to my wickiup? Yep. People at this time made baskets which they used for collecting seeds, pinyon nuts, and other plants. They also use baskets for cooking. They have their little thing going. Not much different than people today. A little different, not much different, right? You got to survive. Right? People made several kinds of spear points. The Latin spears or help them hurl small spears faster and further, right? They also have eaten insects. Yeah, the archaic people left behind petroglyphs, and you can see the echoes of their lives in the Barrier Canyon style marks left behind in the sites. It's a shame though that people had gone in there and like did graffiti and whatever. They really kind of messed it up. But then you had the Fremont life gradually changed approximately 2,000 years ago from nomadic hunting and gathering to more farming. Two broad cultures evolved during this time. One was which the Fremont. This is the general term used for people who lived in north and eastern Utah. You are the Fremont. The Fremont were also farmers, foragers. We know the Fremont were farmers because of the granaries and dry foods that they have found. You would think that people would know more. You know what I mean? Like when I was digging into all the info, I think that there's a lot of these scientists and or researchers that get paid a ton of money, and they don't have to provide very much, or they don't know very much. Or they can kind of just like even the person saying like the Anastasia, the evil one. All you have to do is ask some Navajo, and they'll tell you what the word means. But yet these guys like kind of want to burst out there saying, "Hey, I know all these things." My thing is, let me get off of this. My thing is, these beings were obviously here before people were, you know, and take that into consideration of the blending of cultures. You want to say the blending of mankind, or just how people have grown on the planet. Over 7 billion, almost 8 billion people on the freaking planet. You know, uh, and not a huge amount of time. So I think it's interesting that when people think of aliens, they think that they're from somewhere else, and they may have been from somewhere else originally. Of course, or they may have a whole different places. Earth is just one of those stops. If you listen to Admiral Byrd, he talked about the silver discs down in the South Pole coming out, destroying his fleet. And then he rushed back to Washington and told him that these silver discs are the biggest danger. So, and he said he called the guy the Great One, had a message, the Great One. So, why people want to hide this information from you? There's probably a whole bunch of reasons. If they're religious people, I would say that they don't want to mess up their cash flow, and start admitting things. You know what I mean? And it's if you think about the Catholic Church and all the pirates that they had and all the plunder that they sent them out on, all the treasures that were brought back, and all the documentation from the Knights Templar and all that, these were the people who knew things. These were the ones who invented things. These are the ones who are in communication, right? But if you're an alien species, let's say yeah, other, you're other than what humans are. Why would you want to talk to people? I mean, I'm feeling I can't learn anything from people now, really, because there's not much not much to learn off of people, except what not to do. I mean, you get to a certain age and you should already automatically know a bunch of things of what not to do. But when I look at society, I have to tell you, I don't identify with a lot of people. I feel very distant from a lot of people. And then I have these very powerful spiritual equals that I love, and like my friend Art. I mean, we every time we talk, we just talk like it could be 6 months or something like that, but it's like we just talked and we're always in connection. If he's struggling, if I'm struggling, we reach out to each other, and that's just kind of the antenna you got for the people that you love in your life, your friends. Okay, the truth about the Anunnaki, the Ant people. I thought that was really cool. In fact, the canyon that they found these petroglyphs, Sego Canyon. Sego means I will follow. Isn't that that's when you start putting all these things together, it gets pretty amazing. So let's see, the ancient Sumerian gods that some say were actually aliens. So from 4100 to 1750 BC, the Sumerians flourished in Mesopotamia, worshiping deities called the Anunnaki. Some believe they were visitors from another planet that were responsible for early human civilization's greatest breakthroughs. And if you think of greatest breakthroughs, think that maybe they're the ones who formed the whole bit. And I've done other shows talking about Noah, where I said I didn't believe he was from this planet. I think that and I mean, like, you have to listen to that show because it got real deep. And I even used a declassified CIA report about Project Stargate and what they had discovered in an interesting story about you know about that. Anyway, I don't want to talk about that right now. We're talking about this. So before the Greeks exalted Zeus or the Egyptians praised Osiris, the Sumerians worshipped the Anunnaki, these ancient gods of Mesopotamia, and not just so let's broaden that. Not just Mesopotamia. These ancient gods were from all over. By the way, there's an area in Turkey called Potbelly Hill, and the petroglyphs found there were very similar to the petroglyphs found in Utah at the same time, at the end of the ice age. How could that be? So if you listen to Wally Brown, he said the Diné had brought these people, like the ant people also, and the star people, had told people to go to all four corners of the earth, walk the earth. So they had depictions of them, one going one way, one going the other way, and then just basically circumnavigating the entire globe. And wherever they went, they were to go to a stone wall and put a series of circles, a spiral in the wall to show that this was the original mission. This was the original thing that they were told to travel the world and populate it. Right. So these ancient gods in Mesopotamia had wings, wore horned caps, and possessed the ability to control all humanity. Sumerians revered the Anunnaki as heavenly beings who shaped the destiny of their society. You see, how deep is that? Don't tell me you can't do something. People out there, I can't do it, I can't do it. I think that what we're made of and how we were crafted and what's inside of us, people could do whatever they want to do, including be kind to each other. I have to add that in there. Oh, by the way, some of these petroglyphs, they told stories on the flying shields that would show up that could travel anywhere and had the power to do anything, even attack enemies from far away, which is interesting because here's very early man talking about a silver shield attacking enemies from far away. Obviously, there were enemies that there was a thing going on. And if you look at that story, 1561 of Nuremberg, Germany, how there was a battle over the city with these silver discs shooting light at each other, all that, yeah. And then again over Switzerland, not far later. So don't think that every culture out there is going to be kind and loving and nice. And this is why a lot of people warn scientists about sending these messages out into space because you don't know exactly what might show up. You know what I mean? You might have some aliens show up, is going to look at humans like they're chicken. And you see how we treat the chickens. Yeah, that's a damn shame. Cows, all that. Maybe some cats have a good life here and there, some dogs, but that's about it. All right. Let's see. Were the Anunnaki more than just deities? Some theorists say the Anunnaki were aliens from another planet. Even more shocking that they used ancient Sumerian texts to back up this wild idea. Okay, so why the Sumerians worship the Anunnaki? Sumerians lived in Mesopotamia. Present day is Iran and Iraq and Iran. between the Tigris and Euphrates River from about 4500 to 1750 BC. Long time, not as far as the 12,000 years of the Ant people, the Anunnaki. So you have that whole story predates this, quite a bit, right? Despite being an ancient civilization, their reign was marked by a number of impressive technological advances. For example, the Sumerians invented the plow, which played a huge role in helping the empire grow. Right. They also developed the cuneiform, one of the earliest known systems of writing in human history. In addition, they came up with a method of keeping time, which modern people still use to this day. Yes, the Timex, I believe it's called. Uh, uh, but according to the Sumerians, they did not do it alone. They owed their historical breakthroughs to a group of gods called the Anunnaki, and their telling of the Anunnaki mostly descended from a supreme deity who could control both fate of human kings and his fellow gods. Though much remains unknown about the Sumerians and their way of life, they left evidence of their belief in ancient texts, including the Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the oldest written stories in human history. And if one thing is clear, it's that Anunnaki gods were highly revered. To worship these deities, ancient Sumerians would create statues of them, dress them in clothing, give them food, and transport them to ceremonies. Millennia later, some scholars would speculate on what made these Anunnaki so special and why they were held in such high regard. But it wasn't until the 20th century that the ancient alien theory really took off, right? And if you look at all these drawings, you definitely see the ships, the aliens, this, that, and whatever, stuff that wasn't hanging around in their own culture. Much of what we know about the Sumerian civilization comes from clues that they left behind in thousands of clay tablets. To this day, these tablets are still being researched, but one author claimed that some of the texts hold the incredible revelation the Anunnaki were actually aliens. In 1976, a scholar named Zachariah Sitchin wrote a book called The 12th Planet and shared translations of 14 tablets of Enki, a child of the Sumerian supreme deity An. In this book, claimed that the Sumerians believed that the Anunnaki came from a far off planet called Nibiru. Okay, remember the name Nibiru in case you ever get abducted and end up there, and you can actually look smart, like when you're in France. Say, is this Nibiru? People are like, yes. I thought so. Always act like you know what you're doing wherever you are, man. That's my thing. That's what I learned in Harlem and the Bronx. And I'll always act like you know what you're doing. You know exactly where you are. It helps. So anyway, let's see. Nibiru has an elongated orbit, 3,600 years. At one point, this planet passed close to Earth, and its people, the Anunnaki, decided to make contact with our world about 500,000 years ago. What do you think was going on with people 500,000 years ago? I'm going to say not much. Not much. So here's a planet that's nice. Well, probably not. Volcanic and it's a real mess. If you read that CIA report, these guys left Mars because some cataclysm that happened there, and it made it unlivable. And then the closest planet to them that was inhabitable had volcanoes and a real mess and whatever. So they said the one difference was that the planet that they wanted to go to had vegetation and water. Huge difference. How simple is that? I mean, that's common sense simple, right? Not some far out story of just, it's just simple story of survival, you know? So the Anunnaki sought more than just a friendly exchange. They wanted gold. Ooh, gold. Silver and gold. Everybody loves gold. that should be the commercial for it. Everybody loves gold, even the Anunnaki. You know what I mean? They wanted gold, which they desperately needed for repair for their planet's atmosphere. Check that out. Yeah, gold. That's a good line right there. I need gold to fix my planet's atmosphere. Gold. People give it up. You know how dumb people are. Look at religion, man. You know what I mean? I see that Olstein and people like that. I'm like, oh my God. Really? All right. 12 times. Okay. So the Anunnaki saw more than wherever that already. At the time, Sumerians emerged as a civilization. The Anunnaki had given people the ability to write, solve math problems, and plan cities, which led to future development of life as we know it. So, knowing human beings, do you really think the Anunnaki needed gold? Or do you think that the ones who were in charge said, we need all your gold to give to the Anunnaki? And then, they kind of put it in some baskets in their places and say, well, if the Anunnaki wants the gold, they can come get it. Otherwise, I'm keeping it. that's I think that's pretty much how religion started. So they said this may be truly out of this world claim. You see, I don't feel it as a claim. I feel that it's. I don't think that they were. I don't think that people were here before they were here. And if you look at the rhesus monkey and the rhesus negative and all that that came about around 35,000 years ago, do you think it's a mutation in the gene? All these scientists already said that it wasn't a mutation in the gene, that it wasn't from this earth, didn't come from here. So, put that together with all these other stories. I mean, it all kind of intersect, right? But, all right, let me see. Here we go. So, as it turned out, the 12th planet and Sitchin's other books on his topic sold millions of copies around the world. There you go, man. At one point, Sitchin even joined forces with Swiss author Erich von Daniken. That's a cool name. Erich von Daniken. And Russian author Emmanuel Velikskovsky. 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 That's hard to say. I've been speaking Spanish all day. Hard to twist my tongue now to do Russian. Velikskovsky. Got any vodka? Mucho vodka. Yo necesito mucho vodka. All right. I'm learning Spanish. So, as a, let's see, historians, or instead, they believe that the texts were more like scientific journals of their time, and these are theorists who hypothetically correct all accounts. Yada yada yada. Humans in telling were made to serve alien masters who needed Earth's gold to sustain the civilization. But see, that's not how it happened, is it? How it happened is what they in the Bible or in other religious texts you can look at. They talked about the fallen angels. So in Christian terms, way later, thousands of years later, we're talking about Jesus walking around a couple thousand years ago, supposedly, right? In those terms, they didn't want to tell anybody anything about anything unless it was about power and control. And if you thought outside the box, they chopped your head off, and they that was it. And if there was something ancient left over, they took it and they buried it. The Catholic Church was unknown for burying things. They found all of these different these clay jars full of books that they had buried out in the desert. So that this is something that you have to understand about mankind, right? So when you think of the story about the fallen angels, of course, fallen angels, this is interesting, right? Now, fallen angels, this is what the Catholics and Christians basically said about fallen angels. They fought God and they fell out of heaven and they came down here to this planet. Basically, they were thrown out of heaven. Down. Satan was thrown out by Michael the archangel and kicked down into onto the earth. They don't talk about hell. Hell wasn't mentioned till a long time later. They said earth. These fallen angels went down to earth. The fallen angels story is that uh, they didn't want to live under God's law anymore. They didn't want to live under those restrictions, so they voluntarily came down to the earth to have their own culture, their own world. They built a city called Purgatory, where they were able to debate each other and express each other. This is what the other side of the story says, right? But then you go back to think about Adam and Eve. You go way back because nobody knows when this stuff happened. They don't really have an idea of Noah or any of that. They don't have no clue. They have no clue of when this stuff happened. They can only guess at it. I would go by the age, and I would go by the nature that was going on at the time of where. Every culture tells of a great flood, but how that great flood initially happened is a mystery. So, but I mean, you can go really deep and in depth in all of these different directions, but they all kind of intersect at one point. You know, so in the Bible, anything against their word is bad. No matter what. You know, and if you're, I don't know, if you're a good person, you live your life. There are people that will preach the Bible that will tell you that you're not, and you're a sinner, and you're this, and you're that. So it doesn't really equate to a peaceful life, right? No matter how peaceful you are. So anyway, aside from that, I think that I think if you want to learn these stories and know more about yourself, this is what it's all about, boys and girls. It's about knowing more about yourself. It doesn't matter of the ancient rocks of history and people digging through the dirt trying to find bones and whatever. That's fine. That already happened a long time ago. We're talking about the here and the now. If you want to understand more about yourself in the here and now, sure, you should know about your roots and ignore the ones that will jump to the conclusion of saying you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. This is the way it is because this is what my Bible says. The Bible. When I was getting into it, I actually have the Ethiopian Bible, right? Dead Sea Scrolls. It has the most books. The Bible is comprised of books. Not a lot of people understand who wrote these books. In the book of John, they said there was over 30 of them, 30 different dudes who one left off and one picked up. They weren't the same guy, didn't have the same idea or any of that stuff. So forget all that. They can't even get the news right today. Today. You tune into the news. They all lie their faces off or push their stupid agenda. You don't think that it was about power and control and pushing agenda? Do you think Jesus really went around and spoke to thousands of people at these places? You think there was even thousands of people in these towns? Read the Dead Sea Scrolls and you'll have an idea of the time and the age and what was going on at that time, right? And go on YouTube and check out Wally Brown. Wally Brown, Navajo historian. He very, very cool, very soothing to listen to. The guy's real cool, man. And I've been in contact with him back and forth. So very, very deep person. And he understands, he's proud of the Navajo history. They're proud of their roots, you know. And it's important to understand that these stories are powerful for them, you know, that they didn't, even when he talked about the Dene and the ancient language, there was language that they weren't even allowed to write down. And then the children of the Dene, they were the language was taken away. Most of the language was taken away from them. They weren't able to move the mountains. They weren't able to scar out the earth and make all these canyons. This is what the dude says. When they showed up, they were able to move mountains and do all these things. It's just interesting that that's that area in Utah. And there's a few areas there geologically that can't be explained. And you have to just, you know what? If you have nothing to do, go on Google Earth and look at the satellite view and check it out. Just check out those areas. It's so cool, man. And think about for rhyme no reason. Of these petroglyphs and how these Native Americans had gotten out there, and you can actually follow their path from that time as they made their way to Chaco Canyon. You can follow that path. You can follow how they fixed up and built these villages along the way. So this is just a helping hand from the star people, from the ant people. It's important for them that humans survive. And that's got to tell you, I don't think anyone does anything for totally no reason. I mean, and if you take Admiral Byrd, you start putting that together with all these other things, there's definitely different types. Like me and my feelings, I always trust my feelings. like these Navy ships off the coast of Virginia and the Carolinas and all that, being followed by these balls of light, alien ships. You know, when they chase down, from the Nimitz, they chased down these things. They didn't know what the hell they were, how fast they were going, and went from 80,000 feet down to sea level under the water and 500 knots under the water. We don't have stuff that does that, and if we did, they wouldn't be advertising it. And if it was some foreign entity, it would be shooting all kinds of missiles at it, right? So just to think, a couple weeks ago, there was another Navy ship that was going along, and they said these two balls of light were following and kind of ducking and dodging and swirling around. These guys were on a drone assignment. They thought that they were drones, and they launched their anti-drones. And they said they didn't hook in. There was no heat signature or anything like that. So, but it's interesting that they're trying to communicate, or they're trying to do something with the military. With the military, you know. So that's a whole nother thing, whole nother show for that. Anyway, I'm going to end the show. Read more about the Navajo, read more about the Hopi Indian. Go there if you can and explore. If you like to roll around the dirt, it's always fun, man. I love those places. But think about your past and think about your present and think about the future, right? I'll see you guys next week on Discovery Paranormal. Bye. That's what it goes there for, is to unlock the door. For those around me criticize and sleep.